Hello to everybody who's starting to join us now. I can see the numbers are starting to come in. I'm here with Jason Swan from Holborn Assets, who has done a number of webinars with Portugalist before. So very happy to be speaking to him again on his favorite topic, and one that he's very knowledgeable about, the Portuguese Golden Visa. Which is something that has been in the news a lot over the last couple of months. I think back in February, they announced that it was ending, and no applications after that date would go through. Then there was a sort of a U-turn. Jason, you might be able to remind us when all of this was, but I think it was sometime around March or April. They said, well, actually the ones taken between now and then will still count. And then it seems like there's been another development, which I think Jason will probably let us know about today. So it's definitely been very interesting times. I'm sure even more interesting if you actually work in the field of golden visas specifically, like Jason does. But for those people who want to take advantage of this, it's probably been more stressful than interesting trying to get all those documents together and get that application submitted. But thankfully, Jason's going to talk us through all the news, all the developments, and give a little bit of his insight into where he expects the program to go over the next few months, and critically over the next few years. And so, Jason, why don't you introduce yourself and Holborn Assets, and give a little background to the Golden Visa as well?
Excellent. Yes, of course, James. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me onto the webinar. But yeah, it's a very hot topic at the moment. I know you've been posting a little bit around the Golden Visa on Portugalist as well, so hopefully I'll be able to answer some of the questions that have been coming in. But yeah, thanks for everyone that's joined so far. It's been a little while since I was last featured with Portugalist, I think back in February. But if I remember rightly, at the time I was talking about the program ended. There was all the news about the program's finished, and there's a lot of panic because it came out of nowhere. There's been a bit of a roller coaster ride since. And keeping track of exactly what's going on is difficult at the best of times, even being right on the front line here in Portugal as well. So yeah, I'll be covering quite a lot this afternoon. I've sent out an email to everyone just to introduce myself earlier today. Today is really focusing on a live Q&A. We're getting lots of similar questions coming in both the Portugalist and via email directly. So my intention this morning or this evening is to cover off some of those common questions and give everyone a good understanding of what exactly is happening, and answer the question of, can you still apply for the Golden Visa? So the itinerary for today, I'm going to be giving a good understanding, like I say, of what is going on with the Golden Visa, first and foremost. I'm going to start at the beginning for those that are just at the beginning of the Golden Visa venture as well, to explain exactly what the program is and who it's for, and the process involved to get a European passport. I'll be running through some basics along the lines of who can be included on the visa, how many family members can achieve the visa and the passport on the same investment. I'll run through some of my personal favourites, some of my personal picks for qualifying investments across Portugal at the moment. I'll also be showing to you how you can qualify for the visa for less than €280,000. But lastly, I'm going to be jumping onto a live Q&A. You'll see a Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen. We've had lots of questions come in when everyone was registering for the Zoom this evening. I know James has had lots of questions come in as well directly through the website. So I'll field those as best as I can towards the end. Anything that I missed, again, please drop it in the Q&A as we go. We've got until the hour today, so I'll try to get to that Q&A as soon as we can. And by the time we finish, hopefully everyone will have a good idea of what to expect and what's going on. So without further ado, for those that haven't been on to one of the webinars previously, my name is Jason Swan. I'm the senior partner at Holborn Assets. I'm based here in the Algarve, down in the south of Portugal. Holborn is we're not a wealth management, we're not a golden visa company. We are a wealth management practice. We're a global entity. We have 20 offices now globally. We manage over $3 billion between those offices worldwide. and I'm a qualified and regulated financial planner for those looking to move into Europe, and of course, specifically here into Portugal. I also like to think of myself as an expert when it comes to citizenship by investment, which is an increasingly popular topic at the moment, with immigration to Portugal being at an all-time high. So hopefully I can comment on any questions you have around generally getting to Portugal, but also be able to cover off any questions that you have around money matters or tax matters or general planning for you and your family once you get here as well. I've been in the industry now for around 15 years, give or take. I've been in Portugal now for 2 years. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride for various reasons, but I've loved every minute of it so far. And previous to Portugal, I was in Spain for 5 years in Malaga. Previous to that, back in Manchester, if you can pick up somewhat of a Manchester accent, that is where my hometown is before I moved out to the sun. So yeah, I've kind of been there and done it. I've dealt with the bureaucracy of both Spain and Portugal. And like I've been given advice now to expats for quite some time. So yeah, please don't be shy with any questions on anything related as we go through. Okay, so let's just give a quick recap on exactly what the Golden Visa is. So if you haven't already done your study, the Golden Visa is a program that was introduced by Portugal back in 2012, which allows new residents to live in Portugal. And it's a 2-year visa to allow you to live in Portugal full time, and it gives you all the rights of a Portuguese citizen during that time. Other than you cannot vote and you cannot run for president. But other than that, it gives you full access to the sun, to also the education system in Portugal. It also gives you access to the healthcare system, one of the best healthcare systems in the world. And yeah, overall, a very nice quality of life. But it's Europe's most successful citizenship program. Portugal is very much seen as the kind of gateway to Europe. It has the shortest time to achieve the European passport, which is 5 years. And it also has the lowest entry requirement, where you can qualify with as little as 280,000 euros. So it's a 2-year visa. You can renew the visa every 2 years, as long as you continue to meet the criteria. And as you've held the visa for 5 years, you can then apply for a passport. And of course, Portugal's passport is a European one, which allows you to effectively receive 27 passports all at the same time, because once you have that, you can live and work or retire in any of the EU state. Also, the minimum stay requirements to maintain the visa is only 2 weeks in every 2 years. You don't have to move to Portugal to achieve the visa. So you can start the clock ticking to the passport by only spending 1 week every year in Portugal during those 5 years, or probably 2 weeks every 2 years. So for those that are looking to retire or maybe have a bit of a backup option, should they want to move into Europe in the future, for those that are thinking about maybe education for their children, or just an overall idea of living in one of the nicest parts in the world, although I'm slightly biased, then you can do that without having to move right away. But that's what the program is. That is what is an offer, and ultimately the carrot at the end is the visa, sorry, is the passport for Europe. And just to reinstate the many reasons why people come to Portugal and start that program. But again, you have access to one of the best healthcare and best education systems in the world. It's overall a very nice standard of life. I live down in the south, where it's typically a little warmer. The beaches are a little nicer. The overall atmosphere is a little more relaxed compared to the likes of Lisbon, which is very much more built up and cosmopolitan, being the centre. And then up north, you have Porto as well, which is quite as busy as Lisbon, not quite as relaxed as the Algarve. But they're generally the 3 hotspots for Portugal. Of course, you have inland Portugal, where you don't find as much tourism. It can certainly offer a nice, tranquil and peaceful way of life. And everyone has their own favourites. I don't know, what's your favourite, James? Have you got a favourite part of Portugal?
I do actually. Well, it depends, because I've got a favorite, different parts that I like to live in, different places that I like to visit. In terms of visiting, I'm really fond of the Azores, the islands in between mainland Portugal and North America. They are amazing to visit. They look like Hawaii, but they're in Portugal. I don't know if I would live there though. It's very remote. while very, very beautiful. So you would be cut off from the rest of the world, which could be very, very nice for a little bit of time, but maybe not forever. And then I think for living, Lisbon, I think is great for me, but I've spent time in the Algarve as well, and I love that too.
Yeah, all of them are very much very different. I always forget about the islands as well. I always talk about Lisbon, Porto, and Algarve, but it's not all of Portugal, is it? But yeah, it's everyone's personal preference. You're not going to go too far wrong, in my opinion, no matter where you settle. But the overall cost of living, certainly in the Algarve, is much lower than some parts of the world. Lisbon a little more expensive, but Portugal as a whole, yeah, so it's a good quality of life, overall low cost of living. And there's also very favourable tax treatment, which I'll come on to in a second. But for those that are moving to Portugal and will continue to receive an income from abroad, there is a very unique tax treatment that you can apply for in Portugal called NHR, which, yeah, we can come through now. So NHR, although tax is not the most exciting topic on the coming to Portugal, it is an important one. NHR could save you a small fortune in tax in Portugal. So as soon as you have an address here, we can look to apply for this tax regime. And for those that have an income such as rental income, or perhaps a dividend income, whether it be from a personal stakeholding in a company, whether it be from an investment portfolio. First of all, those sources of income can be completely tax exempt for the first 10 years that you live in Portugal. Furthermore, pension income is capped at just a flat rate of 10%. But for those that are still those are still working, whether it be in an employed or self-employed basis, it's depending on the line of work that you're in, you can also apply for a flat rate of just 20% income tax as well. For those that are living long-term off savings and investments, there are certain investment vehicles as well, which can continue after the NHR has expired to give a 60% discount on the tax for the rest of your life as well. So these are all put in place, of course, to attract the world's leading talent. I'm not too sure if I was the leading talent when I moved to Portugal, but it was definitely a factor as to why I preferred Portugal over Spain. Yeah, for those who have an income from overseas, it can work particularly well. So it costs about €200 to apply for NHR, and it will benefit those that become tax resident. Now, just to be clear, applying for the Golden Visa does not affect your taxation. So it's a misconception. Okay, your visa is permission to live here. It's not your automatic tax residency. You have to physically be in Portugal for over 6 months of the year before you become a tax resident here. And it's at that point when NHR can reduce the tax that you're liable to in Portugal. Up until that point, you won't have a tax liability here anyway, unless you have an income from within Portugal, like a rental income, for example. So yeah, loads to cover on that. For any questions on NHR and how that could benefit your income, and if your income does qualify, again, please drop a message in the Q&A. There'll also be an option to drop me an email with my contact details at the end for any questions on that. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So the question of today's webinar is, can I still apply for a Golden Visa? So as James rightly said, it has been a bit of a roller coaster ride since February this year. And yeah, there has been another development, a last minute entry before the law was passed, as kind of, yeah, put a bit of a spanner in the works. But there's a bit of a recap. In February, I think 21st of February this year, there was an announcement from the Prime Minister that the Golden Visa program has finished. And you may remember headlines out of nowhere of Portugal cancelled the visa program. Portugal Golden Visa finished. A lot of panic and worry, and a lot of incorrect reporting. There's a lot of information online, which was a bit of was more designed to get clicks rather than accurate information or understanding of how the law actually works. But the program has not finished. Just to be clear, the program is still fully in action. It's exactly the same today as it was a year ago. However, the Prime Minister has now made it very clear that his intention is to close the program, or should I say he did back in February. Since then, there was a lot of questions to be answered. There was a lot of panic. There was then a public discussion. So before the law can change, The process that there must be a public discussion. Okay? The public was consulted, all the industry experts, all different fields and sectors of Portugal had their chance to put forward their case as to why and if the programme should be cancelled. The whole idea of the programme stopping is to solve Portugal's housing crisis. At the moment, house prices have increased by over 30% since 2020, and there is a severe lack of social housing available. So the removal of the golden visa was one of 16 potential solutions to those problems. But it's been in common discussion now that in actual fact, it won't really make any difference to those programs. The actual number of transactions related to the golden visa equates to less than 1% of house transactions in Portugal. So there's been a lot of to-ing and fro-in about it being cancelled and changes and so on. There was a public discussion until the end of March. And the draft law was issued, the draft changing law was issued, which again didn't make a lot of sense. There was a lot of questions. There was a lot of backlash from some of the top law firms in Portugal. The public discussion went forward. There was then a parliamentary vote. Okay, so that draft law was put to Parliament just a few weeks ago, back in May. The exact date, but 19th of May, Parliament voted to close the programme. There was an agreement with the draft changing law, which we were kind of expecting, and it then was just a question of when is it going to happen. So since then, it's been all very eerily quiet. There's not really been any updates. I'm a member of various groups here in Portugal with government officials and with some of the top law firms, all of which are completely in the dark the past few weeks. However, as of literally yesterday, there was an amendment to the law, and it would appear that the golden visa is going to survive. I never thought I would be saying that back in February, but the golden visa is not being cancelled, everybody. You are the first people to know, literally fresh off the press, as of literally yesterday, the golden visa is not being cancelled. The government no longer wants to cancel the programme, which is great news on the face of it. It's almost a sigh of relief. I can almost hear the sighs of relief. However, as good of news as that is, the big part to factor in is that 95% of applications for the golden visa are done by investment into real estate. And the government has made it very clear that they wish to eliminate the possibility of both commercial and residential property to qualify for the programme. So on one hand, it is good. There's going to be some form of golden visa to continue. However, as it stands, you will not be able to invest in any type of property and qualify for the programme. So this is the draft law. It's not final, but as it stands, the government still wants to cancel applications with property, which is by far the most popular option. If that does go ahead, the consensus is that you will still be able to invest into certain types of investment, like investment funds, Portuguese investment funds. I don't know what they will look like or how good they are or what they invest into. I just know that they'll be heavily biased to investing into Portugal. There is likely to be venture capital funds that you can choose from, where you can invest in some of Portugal's regeneration, whether it be maybe a wind farm or maybe a new farming land or renewable energy, something along those lines. But there's different projects that you can get involved with. It's unlikely that there's going to be any, the cash transfer option is going to be eliminated as well. Again, up as of today's date, you can transfer €1.5 million into a bank account. That's to go as well. So there will be some options, but to be clear, property is going to be off the table if the government gets their way. So coming back to this slide for a second, so we've had the parliamentary vote. Pretty much the final draft of the law has now been put together. The final wording will be presented to the president on the 19th of July. Because the 19th of July is a date for your diaries. At that point, we will find out the fate of the programme. The president has the power to immediately put those new laws in place, He has the power to refuse the new laws, and he has the power to request some amendments. We understand the most likely situation is that it will be approved. There are still some question marks over whether some of the proposed changes clashed with the constitutional law of Portugal. And one of the options the president has is to refer the draft law to the Constitutional Court for assessment, which of course will take a little more time to assess. But we must plan for a worst case scenario. And in a worst case scenario, if the president does confer, if he does go ahead with the law as it is at the moment, or how it's proposed at the moment, the program will end as early as the end of July. I think that is the worst case scenario, the end of July. If the president says, yes, I'm happy with all these draft changes, the law has now changed. In reality, between the 19th and the end of July, the law changing, if history is anything to go by, it's very unlikely that it will happen that quickly. Again, even if the president says, yes, let's change the law straight away, the chances are it will likely go into August before the law physically changes. We're kind of hoping, in a best case scenario, we might get a bit more time. The president may say, yes, I'm happy with these changes. Yes, I want the program to be cancelled. But I'm going to give everyone a bit of time. I'm going to give everyone to the end of the year to submit their applications. Ireland closed the Golden Visa program early this year with a three-month grace period. That may happen in Portugal. There has not been any mention of a grace period in the draft changing law as of yesterday. So this is just hearsay at the moment. There is no talk of a grace period. If anything, it's looking very unlikely for a grace period. And everything is pointing to a closure in August, I would say at the moment, and that's the general consensus within my network as well. So we have to work for the worst case scenario. We plan for the worst case scenario. We hope for the best case scenario. In the meantime, those that are looking to get involved with the Golden Visa that are a little bit worried about the time, don't panic at this point. It's not a case of panicking and rushing into the program at this stage, but we're kind of getting a little bit shy on time. But we do give you some protection. So with Holborn, we do the full service. We help find the investment. We will do the applications. We manage the legal work. We do the translations. We do everything remotely and literally do everything. We apply for the flex numbers. We get your bank account set up and so on. But there's quite a lot to do, and it's going to take at least 4 weeks. We can target 4 weeks from start to finish. We can do it faster. The fastest we've done it is in about 10 days. The longest has been about 6 months for various reasons, but on average, we're able to get everything through in 4 weeks. But if for any reason the program does close before we're able to submit your application, then Holborn will refund anything that you've paid up until that point. So we at the moment, we are currently guaranteeing to meet the deadline. And if we don't do that, you will not be out of pocket, and we will foot the bill for legal fees and any deposits that you've paid on your property. So we're still pretty confident. We're still okay for the deadline, but like I say, 4 to 6 weeks generally is how long we should be taking. And in a worst case scenario, we've now got, would you believe, 4 to 6 weeks until actually end of July, early August time. My advice at this point is for those, like I say, if it is something that you want to do, now is the time to get the information that you need. The window is closing. And if you want to do it and you can do it, then yeah, now is the time to do it. Now is the time to do it. Get the information. I would say to schedule if you want to go through any questions. If you want any information to help with the decision making, then let's book a meeting to speak on Zoom. But yeah, now's the time to get the information that you need whilst the window is still open. And just to be clear, what we need to do before the law physically changes, as confirmed by the Prime Minister, is that all applications submitted before the law physically changes will be honoured and protected under the current law. So to be absolutely certain of meeting the criteria and the time for the visa, we must submit your application before the law changes. We do not need to receive the visa. Okay, that can take around 12 months to actually get the visa. But we must apply for it, and we must have the tracking number from SEF to do before the law comes into effect. After the law comes into effect, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But yeah, it could be cancellation. Well, yeah, we kind of know it's not going to be a cancellation now, but we would likely see some very, very significant changes. At the moment, no property investment. Back in 2020, when the law, when it was announced that it was going to be cancelled, the changes that followed thereafter was an increment of the minimum investment on pretty much all investment criteria. The minimum investment some rapidly increased, so that could be another thing. The minimum investment, if only funds are available, but bearing in mind it's only property that you can qualify with at 280 at the moment. Every other qualifying option is 500,000 euros. So for those looking to get in at 280, now is the time to take action, because as the draft law currently stands, even if the program stays in place, the minimum will be 500,000 euros. And I would say the criteria at 280 is by far the most popular choice of investment. Of course, if you can get the same visa and the same passport for half as much capital, great. But you can do that at 280. But I want to be really clear, and I'm repeating myself, but I want to make this really clear that as things stand, we may have until the end of July, early August, and submit an application for anyone looking to get in the program at 280. The minimum, the beginning of August, will be 500,000 euros. That's a real big change. Okay, I think I've hammered that home enough at this point. Again, any questions on timing, please ask. Drop a question in the Q&A. We'll come back to it shortly. And again, feel free to drop me an email. Now, for those that are thinking, okay, I'm still okay. We've got time. I'm still interested. I can still do it. Let me talk you through who can apply. So anyone that doesn't already have an EU passport can apply for the visa. And they can also include their dependents on their application. So that includes a spouse. So you can be married or unmarried. Either is fine as long as you live together. You can include children up to the age of 21. And they must be in full-time education above the age of 18. We can go as high as age 26. But again, we must evidence them being in education. But yeah, ultimately, dependent children that can be included. Also, parents. If you want parents to come with you, and you can add parents as well. If they're above the age of 65, they can automatically go into the application as they're assumed as dependents above that age. If they're under 65, we must evidence that they are in some way dependent on the main applicant. You can include brothers or sisters. You can include friends or colleagues. But anyone that falls under that criteria, you can add onto the same application. It's designed to bring 3 generations of people to Portugal if you can. So yeah, as many people as you can get on, the better. Any questions on that? Again, just message in the Q&A. Now, current criteria. So this is how you qualify for the program right now, up until when the law changes. Okay. The last change was at the beginning of 2022. Okay, and the government announced that you can no longer invest into residential property in any of the main cities, such as Lisbon, Porto, or basically anywhere on the coast. Now, if you want to invest in those areas, you now must purchase a commercial investment, okay, which generally comes down to an investment in a hotel or a commercial complex of some kind. But you cannot buy residential property in the main areas. You can still buy residential property inland, otherwise it is commercial only. Now, the standard price point, you must invest 500,000 euros to invest in a property. However, if it is in a low density area, that comes down to 400,000. If the property has been renovated, okay, it must be a commercial renovation, where the building is over 30 years old, you can qualify at 350. And if that development is in a low density area, that comes right down to 280,000 euros. The other options to qualify for the visa all start at 500,000. Okay, so you can invest into a qualifying investment fund. There are different medium, high, and low risk funds to choose from. You can invest into venture capital funds, You can invest into scientific research. You can set up a business or purchase a business subject to employing a certain number of staff. Or currently, you can simply transfer €1.5 million into a Portuguese bank account, which is not the best of ideas, in all honesty, because there's not really any interest in the banks, but also Portugal's banking system isn't quite as robust, shall we say, as other parts of the world. So it's not the most, it's not the best place to hold substantial amounts of money. For me personally, I would hold what you need to hold in Portugal, and then to utilize other jurisdictions to make sure you maximize security that you have for capital. But I personally wouldn't be too comfortable holding €1.5 million in a Portuguese bank account. But that's for another day. Other than that, anything in yellow you can qualify for on the program. And like I said, the ones at the top at the moment are likely to come to a close, and we will be left with the top 3 of those at the bottom: the investment fund, scientific research, or setting up a business. They're likely to be the selection post-August. Does that all make sense, James? Have I covered that off all right?
That all makes sense to me. So I've got 2 questions for you now. If let's say that I wake up from a coma in August and I've missed the deadline, what of the options that are left, those 3, would you say is the best one to go for?
I would, well, it depends on personal preference, but for me, an investment fund is the one that is the most hands-off and easiest to understand. Potentially the most profitable, depending on what you invest into. But the scientific research, unless you're in the field of scientific research, it is a completely new industry to get involved with. And setting up a business or purchasing a business might require a lot of time, a lot of staff management. Again, unless you want to really have a business in Portugal, then again, it might not be like an option. But an investment fund, it's very much hands-off. It can be managed by someone like myself, who does the day-to-day decision making on it.
And then in terms of the investments, we've got the full menu of investments now until the end of the program, or until the changes in the program. Given that it could be a very short time frame, which options do you think are best for people to look at?
Well, as a general rule of thumb, the properties that qualify at 280, you generally find are not profitable. Some of them are slightly profitable, but in the main, the benefit of qualifying at 280 is that you get the visa and the passport with half as much money. However, as standalone investments, they're not necessarily what you would invest into if you didn't want to get the visa. Whereas at 400 and 500, you'll also find that they can be very profitable as well. They often offer substantial rental incomes, often things like taxes paid and other incentives. But yeah, at 400 and 500, you've got some of the most profitable properties out there in Portugal, and at 280, yeah, less profitable, but less cash needed to get the passport.
Okay, and once you get to the point of citizenship, are you able to get your money back from these different options?
More often than not, yes. So on properties, which we'll have a look at shortly, but the properties more often than not offer a buyback. Certainly the ones that I recommend offer a buyback, so that you've got a kind of a worst case scenario, if you like. So regardless of property prices, you've got that guarantee of at least the capital that you invested coming back to you. But yeah, we'll have a look at a few of those shortly, James, and I'll run through the different types of buybacks that you can get as well.
Okay.
Okay, but yeah, any questions on those, drop them in the Q&A, and we'll come back to that. That's that shortly. So, this is a very busy slide. I'll quickly run through this. This is the process of which we have to go through to get your visa. So it's quite a busy slide, because it's quite a busy process, I suppose. But step 1 is just to find an investment, choose a property, choose a fund, whatever it may be, and make a decision on which investment meets your requirements. As soon as we have that, first thing my team will do is apply for your Portuguese tax numbers, which is referred to as your NIF. As soon as you have that, we can't really do anything without your Portuguese tax number. But once we have that, one of a couple of different things will happen. Now, up until the announcement, we would normally then go and set up a bank account on your behalf. However, the time to set up a bank account on average now takes about 8 weeks. And since February, we've decided that we're no longer going to recommend setting up the bank account before the application. So instead, we're now going to use the lawyer's escrow account. So the enacting lawyer, you can transfer the funds directly to the lawyer's escrow account, or alternatively, you can fly into Portugal and set up a bank account on the same day. But either one is fine. And once you have your tax number, you will meet with the lawyer. The lawyer will go through the legal documentation. You'll complete things like the sale and purchase contracts, the buyback contracts if applicable, the rental agreement if applicable, and you complete the power of attorney with the lawyer. Once all that's done, you'll transfer the funds accordingly, and you'll complete the deed. I should say the lawyer will complete the deed on the property. As soon as you've completed the deed, we can then submit the application to SEF for your visa. And that's the safety point, James. At that point, that's all you need to do. We don't have to receive the visa. We just got to get to this stage here of submitting the application before the law changes. And then you can relax a little bit then. As long as we've got it submitted, we've got as long as we need then to get the visa. But about 6 months after that process, we'll then need to fly into Portugal for the first time to do the biometrics. You'll have a member of the team accompany you to the SEF office. You'll have your photo taken and your fingerprints ready for your visa card to arrive, which will be around about 12 months after you've submitted the application. So that's generally what happens between now and getting the visa. Again, all of this is done by Holborn. There's nothing that the investor needs to do until they fly into Portugal for the biometrics. Everything else is done remotely with myself as ultimately the project manager, making sure everybody's speaking to one another from my team, transacting that process throughout. Once the visa is in hand, as I mentioned before, it's a 2-year visa. Okay, we must renew the visa every 2 years. After 5 years, however, you can apply for the permanent residency and for the passport. The only other conditions to apply for the passport is you must first of all understand a basic level of Portuguese. I say basic, but I personally find language is very difficult. I was terrible in Spain, and I'm even worse in Portugal. For those that are not quite as useless as me when it comes to languages, should find it relatively straightforward. The majority of our clients are kind of starting from scratch and being able to do a crash course within a matter of a few months. But it's kind of a high school equivalent exam that will need to be done before you can apply for permanent residency. And you must keep a clean criminal record as well. So don't have any run-ins with the law, otherwise it may jeopardize your application for permanent residency. Other than that, as long as you maintain the visa, you learn some basic Portuguese, you keep a clean criminal record, it's a very straightforward application then to apply for the passport. And that's it. That is job done. Once you've got the passport, you no longer need to renew the visa. You don't have the 5th best passport in the world. You have visa-free travel to 187 countries worldwide, and you have full-time living rights to any of the EU countries at that point. Okay, right. Any questions on that? Drop them in the Q&A. We'll come back to it shortly. Keen to get onto the Q&A. But just as a quick recap, step 1, we need to find a qualifying investment for you. We'll start the process and we'll apply for the visa. We'll aim to submit the application within 4 weeks. That is a very loose, I'm loosely saying 4 weeks. So there is a bit of a rush at the moment of applications, but we're still managing to do things there and thereabouts within 4 to 6 weeks. Once we've submitted the application, we shall be around about 12 months to receive the visa, which we'll need to renew in year 2. And again in year 4, after the 1st year, we'll then apply for permanent residency and citizenship. Okay. All nice and clear, James? Was that all right on the process? Let me know if I'm going too fast.
No, this is going well. We've got a couple of questions coming in, so I'll get those to you once we get to the Q&A time.
No problem. Okay. Right, so I promised I would share a few of my personal favourites at the moment. There's these that under the current criteria of what qualifies as property. Now, starting from €280,000, there are two developments in particular that we like. One is about, well, very close to me in the Algarve, right on the south coast in a town called Portimao. Those familiar with F1 will be aware of the Portimao F1 track. And this restaurant, this hotel, a very futuristic looking hotel here, is currently being built, and it will be a 5-star hard rock hotel when it's all done. It will look exactly as you see in the photos here. And the proposition, this hotel, it qualifies for 280. So to qualify at 280, it's a commercial property. It's in a low density area. It's over 30 years old, and it's going through a full renovation. So 280 is fine. And the developer is looking for a total of 245 investors to buy a share in the hotel and to become a co-owner of the hotel. The way that works is your name is on the deeds to the property. You will formally own part of the entire hotel. You're not buying an individual room, you're buying part of the entire hotel. There is also, again, to be confirmed, hopefully this week, likely to launch a full title deed option as well, where you can actually buy one of the individual apartments from the hotel. It's expected to launch from 400,000, but at least for a minimum of 280, we're good to go on this development. The developer is one of the biggest developers in Portugal. They've been around for over 30 years, and they have a very handsome portfolio of over 40 hotels across Portugal already. This hotel will have 275 rooms and all the amenities of a 5-star resort. The incentives are a little bit thin on the ground on this one, in all honesty. However, the developer will defer the IMT cost. Okay, something to be mindful of. There's no IMT up front, which is around about 20,000 euros normally at this price point. But the developer will defer that to when you do the buyback in 5 to 6 years' time. There's no VAT to pay on the refurbishment of the hotel. More importantly, it has a guaranteed buyback. It's going to question before, James. With this one, it has a mandatory buyback. So as soon as the passport has been granted, you can trigger the buyback, and that will immediately return the capital of 280,000 or 400,000 to the investor. It is a mandatory buyback, so you cannot keep it. You don't get any interest. You don't get any rental income. You simply get the 280 back that was invested. The 400 option might have an optional buyback, but we don't know just yet. But you have got a buyback one way or another. So you're going to get that 280 back once you have the passports. And you can stay at any of the developers' hotels for 1 week every year free of charge to maintain the minimum stay requirements as well. So it's a well-known developer, well-known hotel chain. It's a very traditional, very solid option to qualify. Like a little bit slim on incentives, but it allows you to qualify at 280. But it's a solid option. Door number 2, my personal favorite at the moment is a Wyndham Gardens development, which is being launched very soon up in the north of Portugal. It's going to be a 4-star Wyndham hotel. This one, very similar proposition. Okay, be very nice when all finished. And in the meantime, you can invest to buy a share of the hotel, again from 280,000 euros. I mixed this slide up. So we've got the full title deed option on the previous one. This one is just the co-ownership option of 280,000 euros. The developer on this one does pay the full IMT cost. Okay, there's no deferment. They pay all the taxes up front, other than a little bit of stamp duty for about 1,700 euros, but they pay the big IMT cost of 20,000. They have a guaranteed mandatory buyback when you have your passports. However, they also offer an incentive of 30,000 euros as an upfront rental income as well. So as soon as you complete the deed, you get that 30,000 back. So this also answers another question I wanted to cover of how to qualify for the visa for less than 280. With that 30,000 euros cash back, you're effectively buying in at 250 with a guaranteed buyback of 280 once you have the passport. So this is officially the lowest capital option to qualify for the visa anywhere in Portugal, with a huge hotel group. It's with a well-known developer with a good track record. The development's already funded. The renovation is already underway. The hotel subscribed 30% of the unit within its first week. It's now in its third week of marketing. Still a good amount of availability left. And again, they will allow you to stay for 7 days free of charge each year to maintain your stay. So for me at the moment, this is number one at the 280 price point. Once this is fully subscribed, number two, I think would then be the Hard Rock Hotel. Holborn, this is another really nice development. Unfortunately, sold out a week or two back now. It's the Yellow Tulip in Holborn, something of interest. This is a full title deed ownership from 280. Let me know. And sometimes apartments come back up for sale. So I can let you know of the first refusal if so. Otherwise, at 350, there's a nice development in Lisbon. Okay, downtown Lisbon, you can buy a share in this hotel here. As you see, all in colour, very close to the waterside. This one qualifying at 350. The 4-star hotel. All the same really on paper as the Hard Rock, apart from there's a slight return of 3% per year from when the hotel is built. So it's an extra 70,000 to be invested, but it pays a return of just over 10,000 as an incentive to do so. I'll let you make the decision on whether you think that's a worthwhile extra 70,000 or whether to stick at 280. But again, you can get the free 7-day stay each year, as well as the IMT being deferred, the VAT being paid, and the buyback in place as well. Okay, the Pelican. This one is very last minute. I've mentioned this on a few webinars. There is one, this was sold out. There is one bedroom apartment left at Pelican. It literally came back up for sale this morning. It's available on a first come, first served basis. The one beds were the first to sell. The development is in Alvor, which is a couple of towns over from me, in the Algarve. Don't know where I go on my staycations, if you like, at the weekend, but this development has already been renovated. It's already built. It's already on booking.com. You could stay there tonight if you like. It's a 4-star hotel in Alvor. And the incentive with this one, you can buy a one bed at 400,000. It qualifies at 400. It's a new build in a low density area, hence 400,000. The one beds pay a rental income of 5.2% per year. On top of that, the developer will pay 6 years rental income up front. They pay 6 years rental income up front, which allows you to buy the one bed at 306,000 with a buyback of 400,000. So just to be clear on that, you get 6 years rental income paid up front. So far up front, it's paid to you before you even complete the deed. So it reduces the capital that you need to buy the apartment. Ultimately, the apartment then costs 306 plus taxes, but the apartment is 306. And then you have a guaranteed but optional buyback at 400,000. So in a worst case scenario, you're going to get 400,000 back as soon as you have the passport. If prices continue to increase in the next 5 years, as they have done in the last 5 years, you might want to keep the property. And you can do that with an optional buyback. You can either sell it on the open market for more than 400, if allowable at that time. I can say if the market demands it at the time. Or you can rent it and you can continue with the rental income. Or you can keep it empty and have it as a holiday home, whatever you like. But worst case, 400 back. And you can stay there for 4 weeks every year, free of charge as well. So yeah, anyone interested in the one bed, it is a high rental income with 6 years paid up front. For any inquiries on that one, please send me an email straight away and I'll provide you with the costings for yourself and your family. Last but not least, the Royal Obidos has, I think there's a few studios left at the Royal Obidos. There is one bedroom for sale. Again, it's come back to market over the past couple of days. I'm not too sure exactly which unit it is, but this is a 5-star golf resort up in Obidos. It's north of Lisbon, about 45 minutes north of Lisbon on the Silver Coast. It is a purpose-built resort for a PGA golf course. It's actually built on a PGA golf course. The hotel at the back is not for sale. However, the apartments at the front are privately owned. They consist of 1 bedroom and studio apartments. All sea facing, all overlooking the golf course that you can see at the back. Particularly attractive for any golfers. The opportunity, okay, is qualifying at 500,000. So it's a new build and it's not in a low density area. So it's qualified at 500,000, which means you can either buy 2 studios at 350 each, or you can buy a 1-bed at 500,000. The golf course was designed by a quite famous Spanish golfer, Severiano Ballesteros, and the architect for the hotel was quite a famous architect, Mr. Philippe Stark. More interestingly, from a numbers point of view, the rental income before tax, the rental income is actually 7% per year. After tax, still 5.23% per year. Which again, very similar to the Pelican, it allows you to buy a 1-bed at 368 and have a buyback at 500,000. And again, you buy 2 studios for 500 and have a buyback guaranteed at 700,000. So this one, again, I mentioned before, the closer you get to 500, the more profitable it becomes. But this gives you a clear profit margin from the outset. The rental income is paid up front. Buyback is guaranteed, but optional to the investor. So in a worst case, you have the minimum return of capital at either 700 or 500. But you can keep it if you wish, but you can stay for 6 weeks every year, free of charge. Personally, I think you need to be a real keen golfer to spend 6 weeks at the hotel. There's not really a lot going on within walking distance other than golf. There is a nice lagoon at the back. There's incredible facilities, and there's of course spas and treatment within the hotel. But the town of Obidos, probably about 5-10 minutes drive away. You can have the full 6 week, should you wish, or for a client a little while back, we arranged for them to have 3 weeks every year, but to have 2 properties, so they could bring some family out and go play golf with family as well. But that's it, really. They are the top properties right now. The availability is becoming quite slim. We are seeing, obviously, developers not bringing new development to market, very few and far between. Of course, with the program closing, developers do not want to release new hotels designed around the Golden Visa when they might have enough time to sell them. So at the moment, what you see is the best and last availability out there. So for any questions on those, please do ask. Other than that, I've brought my webinars, James, up to date with a bit of tech on this one. So you can now scan the barcode if you like. For those that can use a QR code, or I've not used a QR code before. If you take a photo of this little code here, you will see a link to Calendly. So if you would like to book a personal discussion to go through any questions one-on-one, also for any information with regard to brochures for the developments, you'd like a copy of my guide for Portuguese taxes, plus cost illustrations. So the costs of the process generally vary depending on, of course, the property that you buy and the number of family members that are to be included on the visa. So those can be provided quite easily and quickly. I'm happy to provide the latest stock availability on any of these developments as well. But yeah, with the time that is now left, I wouldn't waste any time emailing. I would just book in a meeting. I'll quickly go through any questions that you have, and yeah, get you the information that you need to make a decision whilst the window is still open. On that note, I'm been talking, James. Hopefully that was okay.
That was great, very helpful. Is there a cost for booking a meeting with you?
No cost. No cost. Happy to do a complimentary call. No problem. It's presents and bribes, but no cost.
Well, that might be a good idea, because I think that was all very interesting and very, very helpful. But definitely, if I was making a choice on them, I would like a little bit more guidance to understand, which one is going to give the best return. As I understood it, if I just want to go for the cheapest option, just to get the passport, it's the one with 280 and 30,000 euros back, so that it'll come to effectively 250,000. Is that right?
Correct. And just be mindful that also the taxes are paid in that one. So the only top on top of the 250 Now, the government fees and the legal fees.
Okay.
We don't charge any fees. Holborn is paid ultimately by the developers. We facilitate the Golden Visa application, which allows them to ultimately sell the development. So there's no additional cost. In Holborn, it's just the legal fees and government fees on top of the purchase price.
However, it seems like if you have more money than that you're able to invest, putting, going for one of the properties around 400,000 or 500,000 will give you a return on that money, as well as being able to qualify for residency and citizenship. Whereas the more affordable options, they're really just to get you in the program, to get you the residency and later the passport.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very difficult to qualify at 280 and make money as well, but the Wyndham Gardens is about as good as it gets. It's the only development I've seen that pays an upfront rental at 280. So, yeah, I think for an application of 1 or 2, you'd still come out after 5 years having made a profit and received passports as well. Yeah, which is about as good as it gets at that price point.
Okay. Well, we've got quite a few questions in between the ones that came through before the webinar and the ones that I can see in the chat there. So I'm just going to quickly run through them, and we'll try and get as many done as possible. But what I would suggest to people is that if they want a more detailed answer, that they get in touch with you and get and arrange a call, because you can provide much more information in a call, whereas we're going to have to sort of spread the questions out a little bit just so that it's fair to every single person. So I'm going to have a look at some of the ones that came through before the webinar, first of all, and then I will do those that are in the Q&A box. But if you do have others, put them in the Q&A box, because even if we don't get to them today, I think we should still have a record of those, and you will be able to follow up with them. Isn't that right, Jason?
Yeah, yep, no problem.
So
yep, fire away. So let's fire through. We'll get through as many as we can.
So here's a interesting question: is can two sisters share one investment and both get the golden visa? Because they are family, but are they the right type of family?
Unfortunately not. Sisters and brothers are not dependent on one another, and it must be a dependence. So children and parents only, unfortunately. So there need to be 2 separate applications. So both would need to do at least 280 to qualify.
Okay. Let's see what is next. So somebody is asking whether there is a wealth tax in Portugal. Maybe you could also talk about the golden visa and whether that leads to being a tax resident in Portugal, and if that's optional.
Yeah, the golden visa does not change anybody's fixed residency, just to be clear. So the visa allows you to live in Portugal, but it does not make you a tax resident in Portugal. Physically being in Portugal does make you tax resident, and that's when your tax is made paying. If you're applicable to wealth tax, there isn't a wealth tax as such, but there may be tax on worldwide assets. So that, I would say, would be a more of a personalised conversation. Once I've got a good understanding of the assets that you hold, I can break down exactly and if any tax will be payable on your worldwide assets.
And I understand then, because there's been 1 or 2 questions about the D7, which is another popular visa. That normally leads to you becoming tax resident, right? That isn't optional.
Well, yes, and to maintain the D7, you have to live in Portugal for over 6 months of the year, over 8 months of the year. So by default, that will make you a tax resident in Portugal. Not the D7 itself, but the fact you have to be here to maintain the visa will ultimately make you tax resident as well.
Okay, so this is really what the benefit of the golden visa is above all the other different visas that are available then.
Yes, it's the only option where you can get the visa and start that 5-year clock towards the passport without physically having to move to Portugal full time. You only have to be here for 1 week every year or 2 weeks every 2 years.
So if you still want to work somewhere else, or you're not ready to move just yet, you could just come on here for 1 week, 2 weeks a year and be on track for that passport, but not have to do the 6 months and uproot your life.
Exactly, and most of my clients, James, they're not planning to move to Portugal straight away. They're thinking of a backup option. Whether they. I mean, at the moment in the US, and a lot of clients from the US that are asking this exact question because they're thinking, if for political reasons things change in the future and I want to move to Europe, it would be great to have the option to do that. So they don't plan to move just yet, but yeah, at short notice might want to move to Europe. So if they have the passport at that time and there's no messes about, and all they've had to do to get it is a nice week's holiday in Portugal each year in the meantime.
So it's a backup option.
It is indeed, yeah, it is a backup. And of course, things like for children as well. I mean, Portugal and Europe has great education opportunities as well. For some countries, that is a big attraction. So it might not be for parents, it might be for children, and giving them access to, like I say, to be able to travel into Europe and study in Europe at a future date as well.
I imagine particularly for people coming from the US at much less of a cost than American universities.
Potentially so. Yep, it depends which one that you're comparing, but yes, potentially so.
So I have an interesting, very specific question. I'm an American citizen, but have German, and I'm going to try and pronounce this word, Niederlassungserlaubnis, which I assume means some kind of residency card in Germany, but they've come in as an American. Does that entitle them to move to Portugal, and where would they be making their application from?
Ultimately comes down to it's an American passport with residency in Germany, I think is the question.
Yeah.
Then no, they wouldn't be well, they would have 3 months access to Portugal at a time. It would be a maximum of 3 months at a time. And that's the same for the rest of the Schengen area as well. If you have an American passport, you by default can spend 3 months at a time in Europe. But any longer than that, you shall need a visa. If that person has a visa in Germany, I assume you'll have full residency in Germany, but still restricted to 3 months in the rest of Europe.
So they could still be a candidate for the Golden Visa then, if they were specifically interested in moving to Portugal rather than Germany.
Oh yeah, as long as you don't already hold, as long as you don't have a German passport, then yes, the Golden Visa would be ideal.
Would a person, this is a similar sort of question, but does a person need to return to their country of residence for the Golden Visa? So this is perhaps someone that's traveling, because they've mentioned residence rather than this German person.
It might be referring to the D7 process. The D7 does start in your home country. However, the Golden Visa, I suppose the Golden Visa does kind of start from your home country, but the actual application starts from Portugal. You don't have to apply from your home country. The biometrics and the applications are all done here in Portugal, although they're all done remotely from home. So
you could actually start the process here in Portugal then?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, well, that is probably good news for those who were thinking they might have to take a trip back to go to the consulate.
Yeah, no, the only official appointment is for the biometrics, which is in Portugal with Seth. It's the application, but there's no meetings with the consulate, unlike the other visa options.
So next question, is it possible to take out a mortgage for the investment, or does it need to be made in cash?
It must be cashed up until the qualifying price. if you like. So you can only mortgage above the price at which it qualifies at. So if it qualifies at 280, but the apartment is 400, you can mortgage what is above 280. But it's very difficult to get mortgages on commercial property. When we were doing a lot more residential property, it was a little easier, but it's next to impossible to mortgage a commercial property, even if you do just mortgage above that figure. So my advice would be to remortgage or take finance from the source, maybe in your home country, or from any source, I suppose, as long as it's not on the property that you're purchasing for the visa. But you can raise finance from other places.
So you mentioned residential property, and I know some people will be weighing that up as a alternative way to get the golden visa before it ends. Do you have any thoughts on the differences between finding a residential property now versus looking at one of these commercial properties with considering the time that's left?
Well, buying a residential property in the time that's left is a big. If you're buying residential and it's somewhere for you to live, not only have you got to know where you want to live, you've got to find the house that you want to live in, and you've got to purchase it before the deadline. Which is a lot to ask. Yeah. So if you've got the property in mind, it could be done. Obviously, with the commercial properties, it doesn't really matter about what it looks like or whether you'd live there. It's a decision that you make with your head rather than your heart. So you can look at the numbers and you can make a decision much easier than planning somewhere that you'd like to spend the rest of your life in. So yeah, if you can do it, great. You've got a bit of time to find your house to live in, but ultimately I think it might be a lot to ask to start looking for houses where you'd like to live in time, you know.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, most people spend a couple of months at least sort of looking at houses, going to viewings and trying to find the right one. It's rare that you find it that quickly. But you never know. Someone might find it. And I think one of the oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. I was just going to say that what does often come up is the option. You can buy a commercial property at, say, like I said, the Wyndham at 280 or 250, but then you just kind of keep that in the background. That gets you the visa, but then you've got as much time as you like then to go house shopping. You know, if you have the capital there to do the visa property and buy your home, you know, you've got a bit of time to buy your home without any price restrictions or area restrictions, as long as you have the qualifying property in the background. Alternatively, my advice when moving to Portugal is never to buy a house to live in straight away anyway, because there's up to 10% in taxes alone. So you don't want to move here and then find yourself wanting to relocate after 6 months to the north of Portugal or down to the south, having paid so much in taxes to buy your home. So best advice would be to rent for a little while until you're absolutely certain of, you know, where you want to live. And at that point, it's a good time to think about buying for yourself.
So you mentioned their area restrictions and said that if you went and got the golden visa through one of these routes, such as the commercial property or any of the other ones that you've mentioned, and then you had money left over to buy a property in Portugal for yourself to live in, are there any restrictions on where that could be? Would the restrictions about Lisbon and Algarve apply to that property?
No, none at all. None at all. You could do it where you buy the qualifying property and then you could go and spend 100,000, 50,000 on a little beach hot drains and go and have that as a second home. Or you can buy somewhere to live. There's no restrictions as long as you have the qualifying property that gets you the visa. You're then free to buy and live anywhere you like.
So there's a slightly off topic, but will apply to anybody who's thinking about moving here on a pension. Is how much would the tax on a pension be?
Under the NHR tax regime, if you do have a pension, we'll register you for NHR, and then it's taxed at just 10%. 10 years. 10%. In Portugal, of course, we need to assess the tax in your home country as well. And if there's a treaty between your home country and Portugal. But as far as Portugal is concerned, just 10%.
And does that apply if you were to just come to Portugal for the 7 days a year, or is that for people who physically live there?
That will only come into fruition when you become a fixed resident in Portugal. So when you physically live here for over 6 months.
Okay.
If you're here for less than 6 months, there is no tax on any income in Portugal other than any income from within Portugal, for example, a rental income.
So worth perhaps having a chat with you to look at what the tax would be in Portugal and this person's country of residence, and decide on a purely financial basis where would be the best place for them to live. And then there's also the emotional aspect as well, isn't there? I mean, even if you are paying tax in Portugal, you are you're getting something in return for that. You get the warm weather, the beaches, access to things like public healthcare. So it is it's not just something that you can do in a spreadsheet.
This is true. This is very true.
So a very similar question to the two sisters buying a property together. So this person has asked if they're buying a property with a friend who isn't a life partner, would they be able to apply for the same golden visa, or would it be separate?
Unfortunately, not. To do Disney thought, no, you cannot include a friend on the same application. So you would need to do a separate application each. The closest thing, if you have a spouse and you can evidence that you live together, then you can be included on the same application. But generally, if just friends living at separate addresses, then no, you need to be on a separate application.
So then a question about whether a grandmother of the applicant could be included, or is it just parents?
Ooh, grandmother. No. Well, yes, in a way. What we would probably do in that scenario is we can, for example, what we will do sometimes, rather than having the children adding parents or grandparents to the application, we can actually do the application in your parents' or your grandparents' name and add the children as the dependents. So grandparents as default, no, are not included. However, we could put the application in your parents' name. They could add their parent as dependents, and they could add you as their children as their dependents. Everybody on the same application.
Okay, so best to speak to you to play to see what the best way to manage that application is.
Sorry, James, I just lost sound there. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Got you back. Sorry.
So if there's any questions about adding family members in that, then best to have a call with you and work out what's the best way to word this application.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, but like I said, anyone over the age of 65 is automatically assumed as dependent. But there's always a way. There's always a way to get everybody on there for most people, as long as not friends. As long as you're related, there's different ways of doing it.
So a couple of questions there on timeframes, and maybe you could sort of, I know you had a slide about that, but what's a reasonable expectation in terms of timeframe if someone puts an application in the next few weeks? How long would it be till they get their residency card?
To submit their application will take 4 to 6 weeks from the point that we start the process. To receive the residency card will be around about 12 months as a guide.
Okay. And so at the point of getting the residency card, that's the moment when the clock starts counting towards citizenship, is it?
Correct. Yes. So assuming it takes 12 months to receive the visa card, you'll then have a further 5 years from that point. So from now, you would expect about 6 years to receive the passport as a guide.
Okay. So, and then you mentioned also about the passport and applying for citizenship and the language exam. Someone has asked if you're able to take that language exam online.
Not online, but you can go to a local testing centre. There are hundreds and hundreds of testing centres all over the world. So yeah, you can just go to a local testing centre to do that exam in your home country.
Okay, and I think now more than ever, it's easier to get materials in that cover European Portuguese. So if you are somewhere else and you're trying to learn it, trying to get that pass mark, there is a lot of courses that you can do online that don't necessarily give you the a certificate, but give you the knowledge you need in order to go to the testing center, and you can access Portuguese TV. And I think notice that there's a couple of new things coming to Netflix now as well, Portuguese language content. So you'll be able to get plenty of practice in wherever you are in the world.
I didn't know that, James. On Netflix, is there?
Netflix, a new one I saw in the news today. So there's been a couple, not a huge number, Portuguese. There's plenty for Brazilian Portuguese, quite a few less for European Portuguese, but it's starting to build up. Netflix has said they want to make more content that's set in Portugal. So that's very good for people who are learning the language. Richard has asked if he could get a copy of the presentation. So is this something that you'll be sending out to people?
Yes, we'll be uploading onto YouTube, James, over the next few days. So we'll send a link out to everybody that's registered probably early next week. Okay. If Richard wants to send me an email in the meantime, I'll make sure he's first on the list. No problem.
Okay. A question then about the biometrics. Is this something that you can get done in your local embassy in your home country, or would you need to come to Portugal?
I say unfortunately, but fortunately, you have to come to Portugal. So you're going to have to use it as an excuse to come and spend a week in Portugal or a few days. But yes, it does have to be done in Portugal.
It isn't a bad thing to have to do, come to Portugal. Is there a map anywhere or directory that shows the areas that are considered low density?
Not that I know of. Generally, Google does the trick on that one. Type in low density areas, Portugal, you'll generally get some information. I could probably pull up. I will probably pull up some information on that. Again, drop me an email, and I can probably dig up a bit of a map for you. That's no problem. But yeah, not off the top of my head, but yeah, I'll send it over to you. So let me know what you need. Yeah, and I'll see what I can find. No problem.
Okay. And then there's a question there. Which investments would a person make returns from? But I think you've sort of highlighted those ones in the presentation, but perhaps maybe worth getting in contact with you to ask that question specifically, and you can give them some guidance depending on what they're looking for.
Yep, I would agree.
Let's see, I think we're coming to the end of the questions there, unless there's anything that you want to say. There's one more there that I've noticed. If there's no residency card for 6 months, so I guess if you've put in your application and the residency card hasn't come yet, would the person need to get a Schengen visa to travel to Portugal in the meantime?
Yes. Yes, indeed. The answer is short and sweet on that one. Yes, you would need the permission for Portugal would only kick in once you have the visa card. Up until that point, you would simply use the rights that you have to Portugal already. If you do have Schengen access, if you don't, then yes, you would need a Schengen visa up until the time the visa is granted.
Okay. And then once you get that, then you don't need the Schengen visa to travel within Europe. Is that right?
Correct. That's right. It'll give you have Schengen access with the visa.
And one more question then about would your global income be taxable in Portugal? And I guess there's different scenarios for that, right?
Yes, there is, but the first thing to remember is that the answer is no until you physically move to Portugal. So by getting the Golden Visa, it doesn't mean you're going to be liable for tax on all your income in Portugal. That again is only when you physically move here. But then, yes, well, as a tax resident in Portugal, yes, you will be liable to tax on worldwide income. So that is sometimes a complicated topic. We need to have a look at where the income comes from. Is there a tax treaty in place between Portugal and that country? And we can calculate what tax, if any, is payable. But yes, if you come to Portugal, you may have tax to pay on your overseas income, and that's where NHR comes into play, because things like rental income and dividends can be completely free from tax for 10 years with NHR, and pension income capped at 10%.
There is another question then about the NHR from someone who is anonymous, who didn't quite understand the information on pensions. What I would suggest then is that you get in contact with Jason and take advantage of that free phone call and get him to explain it to you. Yeah, another question or a comment from Dennis, who said, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Glad you enjoyed it. I hope I've answered some of your questions.
Okay, and I think we're coming to an end with the questions, unless you see anything else there, Jason, you'd like to answer.
Have we covered everything? Do you need to be in the country? Okay, we've covered that. Yeah. Peter, hi there, Peter. I joined late. I have a question. I'm told that certain investments do not qualify for the Golden Visa. I purchased an apartment in Old Howe for €1 million that will be ready for occupancy in December 2024. Would I be able to apply for the Golden Visa? I don't know, Peter. It depends on a few criteria. Ultimately, I need to know a little bit more about the property. And yeah, when it was purchased in particular. Drop me a message, Peter. Send me the details of the property. I'll have a look at whether it's commercial, residential, what the area is, when it was purchased, and I should be able to give you a good guide on whether the answer is yes or no. What else we got? Can I obtain a mortgage? Yep, so we've covered that off. We have a question about the Holiday Inn. Sorry, a second. Right, okay. Hello there. My friend has the experience that biometrics had not happened after 18 months, after a bank account was opened and 280,000 deposited in a Holiday Inn Express hotel. The Holiday Inn Express hotel has not even started. What is the realistic timelines that you expect at the moment? I can only assume it might have been quite an old application. At the moment, CEF has just opened up a load of new applications. CEF have been flooded with applications this week. So you may find your friend is in that list. But at the moment, yeah, biometrics for new applications are comfortably happening within 6 to 8 months of the application. So to make sure that the application hasn't been lost with CEF, or depends who you're dealing with and who's looking after it, but I would consult with your lawyer to get an update on that. But at the moment, yeah, there's time frame 6 to 8 months as normal. Right, I think I've covered everything there, James. I can't see anything else. Yeah, we've got a minute or two if anyone wants to drop in any final questions before we finish up.
Yeah, one or two just quickly came in there. I think Mary was just asking for a confirmation on when the Golden Visa is expected to end.
So the Golden Visa, Mary, the good news is it's not expected to end. You missed that bit, but yeah, it's not expected to end, which is good. However, the important thing to remember is that the government wants to stop applications to do with property. So you will no longer be able to invest in property, potentially from the end of July, realistically from early August. But yeah, 95% of applications over the past 12 months have been done with investment into property. If that is your preferred route, then you have around 5 to 6 weeks to submit an application. In a worst case scenario, we might get a little bit longer, but at the moment, there's no talks of any kind of grace period or transitional period.
So we've got to prepare for early August to be a cut-off point. We need 4 to 6 weeks before that happens to submit your application in time. So yeah, as I mentioned before, if it's something that you want to get involved with, for now, I would just book a meeting. We'll go through it. We'll have a look at some of the investment options that you have, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you have whilst the window is still open.
Helen is asking whether the Azores Islands are covered in these offerings in terms of land or investments or properties.
The Azores is deemed to be a low density area. So yeah, and yes, you can qualify with property in the Azores. Land, no, not land. Property under certain criteria, yes. The Azores doesn't have the same tourism demand as the mainland. So you'll find, again, because of the restrictions around commercial property, it's important that you've got a property that drives a return or has an element of security of capital. So the Azores generally isn't quite as favourable for an investment, but it can still qualify by all means. So yeah, if there's anything in particular, Helen, that you've seen, if you want me to do a comparison or give you some thoughts, very happy to do so. Just send it through to my email and I'll pick that up as soon as I can.
One question there that I missed in the beginning, which was if someone was to apply today, and first of all, how long until they would go for the fingerprint stage? And then in general, overall, how long would it be until they could expect to get their investment back?
Okay, so to do the fingerprints, if we apply today, the fingerprints would happen in around about 6 to 8 months' time. The purchase of the property would need to happen before the application of the visa, so that would be within the next 4 to 6 weeks. The visa takes about 12 months to receive, and then you need to hold the visa for 5 years. So you need the property itself for close to 6 years. So you would get the 280,000 euros back as soon as you no longer need the property. You know, as soon as you've got the passports, which you would be aiming for around 6 years from now, is when you can then trigger the buyback or sell the property to release that capital.
Patrick asks whether it would be possible to purchase a farm.
Possible to purchase a farm? Possibly is, Patrick. Yeah, depends on the location. A farm would be deemed as a residential property, so it wouldn't, not that you generally find too many farms on the coast, but it couldn't be in any of the main cities. But if it was inland, Portugal, and it was over the value of 400,000, then yes, potentially it would qualify.
Okay.
If the farm isn't 400,000, if it's 100,000, then no, it wouldn't. You could buy the farm if you had another qualifying investment running alongside it. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
And I imagine, like the looking for a house, looking for a farm might take a little bit of time as well.
Well, yes, unless there's a farm, I may already have a farm in mind. But yeah, if you've not found the farm, you're probably running a little bit shy on time to find the right farm for the cut-off point.
So I think we are coming to an end of all the questions there. Do you have any others, Jason, that you want to answer, or are you happy to wrap things up?
No, I think we'll wrap up. Just a couple of questions from Rakesh. Rakesh mentioned about the interested in investing in the Douro Valley. There is a development in the Douro Valley, Rakesh, which may be of interest. Drop me an email or book into my calendar with the QR code there. And I'll give you my thoughts on one development that looks quite good in the Douro Valley. Other than that, yeah, I think I've covered everything, James. Yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Thank you for inviting me on the webinar. Hopefully that was okay for everybody.
I think so. I think a lot of people got their questions answered, and Hopefully it's been very helpful and insightful to explain what's been going on with the Golden Visa, because I know it's been very confusing for a lot of people reading the news and trying to understand, is this ending, and if so, when? So at least now they have some clear guidance and can go away and think, is this something that they want to do? And if it is, they can get in contact with you. And if it's any of those properties that just have one or so properties left, then they should do so very, very quickly.
Yep, all sounds good. Thank you much, James. I shall see you on the next webinar. Who knows what the news will be on the next webinar? We might not need another webinar. We might be talking about funds next time instead of properties.
You never know. Yeah, it will be very, very interesting.
Yep. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks, James. We'll catch up soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks then.